We should be live, Beena. We should be live.
Okay.
Yep, we're live. We're live.
Okay.
We're live.
Hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. Good morning, Syl. Good morning, Green, and good morning to everyone who is going to join us live and later recorded. You all are most welcome to the Moreness-Culture. Please do join us. And if you are here, even by the chance, just leave a mark of your presence. This is something that, yes, we all have this thing innate as human being that we want to. And if there is a place you really need to, I must say that, okay, this is the place you need to leave your mark.
Beena, let me just pause you 1 second. By the way, when you don't have your camera on YouTube, it's just a black screen that just says Beena Sidd. That's it.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, I hear you. I hear you. Yes, I'm practicing.
I mean, I know it's not always viable and practical, but you know, just so you know, every now and then.
Oh yes. Okay, so while Syl is busy doing all the sharing and everything, let me just share that, okay, what we are doing here. Usually what we are doing nowadays, like, okay, it's we are doing the capital R reading of Carlos Castaneda's books about Don Juan. And what we are doing is with a very specific intent to connect with Don Juan, to connect with the intent of Don Juan. And the capital R reading process itself, this is a huge deal, because once you are able to do, of course, it's a very long process. I'm just starting. I'm just a beginner here, but capital R reading is a life-changing practice. If you become or if you are able to do the capital R reading of any situation, perspective, person, universe, or any book, or any film, or anything, you will be really far ahead of anyone else, all the other people who are not doing the capital R reading, because you will be able to learn not only what not has been said directly, but you will be able to understand the intent, the context, and also the energy. And this is something, so yes, of course, in other words, moreness, because this is something very huge to understand that, because sometimes, okay, books are very valuable, but can we say that with complete honesty and with complete conviction that all books are valuable? There are very nonsense available in the world, yes. So book itself, yes, the mechanism of a book is very valuable because it has some magic. It involves you, it communicates with you, but not all the books are valuable. Yes. And the second thing, we are not also always be able to extract the value from the book. So the capital R reading process is first to extract value, to create value, even if it is not there. And even, okay, yes, sometimes it is there, but it is not obvious. It is not accessible easily. Obviously, the capital R reading process gives you this ability, makes you enable to extract value when it is not very obvious. So this is the process of
get to the depth, the layeredness, the extra, the bonus that isn't necessarily intended by the author. But when you learn to do capital R reading, you can get more than what was intended even.
Absolutely.
Which is very powerful. Very powerful. Very powerful.
Yes. So yeah, exactly what we are saying. And yes, and this is what we are doing. The capital R reading for about Carlos' books about Don Juan.
Yes.
And with a specific intent to connect with Don Juan. And I must say that, okay, I am having a lot of, sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I'm having a lot of significant instances in my life when I can say that, yes, something is different now. Something is different. Yes. Okay. Yes, you were saying?
Oh, yes. No, I didn't really have anything. I was just going to say where we are at. You know, that we are in. We're reading book 2 a separate reality, and we are engaged in the focus of the book is about capital P perceiving, and that's going to be our focus here, right? Capital P perceiving. This is important. This is important. Yeah.
It is very important. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
and we Don Juan calls it seeing, but we call it capital P perceiving because that's more accurate. And we are engaged with Carlos, where he is he's in this. He wants to learn this, but he's also reluctant to smoke the smoking mixture that Don Juan gives him. But anyway, he's overcoming his reluctance because he doesn't want to lose his clarity. And he's had an experience, he's had another experience, and we're about to undergo, I think, a third experience now.
yes.
I'm trying to think. It refreshed my file, and I have to find it again. What was something in the last thing we read that's a unique word?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'll find it in a second. Yeah, it just, it's reset my file, so I have to find where we were last. Fine. No, fine. Did you know that NAT is part of designated?
That is part of
Designated, like you're the designated driver. But the word NAT is contained in that. When you search for NAT, right, it will bring it up to you. Yeah, but because it's designated. You see, because it's spread out, you don't hear NAT, but it is GNAT. Isn't that cool?
Yes.
Just a little bit of trivia while I look for this. So, all right, I'm here in this general area where Don Juan said, Carlos was assuming that it's more difficult for him, and then Don Juan set him straight there and said, no, yeah, it's not. It's not. It was difficult for him too, even more so, maybe. Right? It just we got to that point. Okay, so did we read this? I really thought I had overpowered the Guardian. I don't think so, right?
You're not sharing screen?
Oh, I know. I was just getting there. All right. Where were we? All right. Let me share screen and then we get there. Okay. It's there. This out. This is underneath. A lot of open windows. Close them all. Minimize them. Yeah, my life is busy, computer. Sorry, I have to have all these open windows. That's the way it is. I do a lot of things simultaneously. What can you do? All right. Brilliant. Just moving the window so I can see you nicely up here. It's important. Put it right under the camera. And little things, technical stuff that has to be done. Anyway, I'm keen to continue our reading because this is quite interesting, this whole setup here, right?
Yes.
Come on now. Drag the window, but I don't want to drag. There we go. All right. Okay, we read this. Read that. Yes. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Right. Suddenly the Guardian appeared again at the point on the horizon. It made a wide circle before stopping in front of me. Its mouth was wide open like a huge cavern. It had no teeth. It vibrated its wings for an instant, and then it charged at me. Actually charged at me like a bull, and with its gigantic wings it swung at my eyes. I screamed with pain, and then I flew up. Or rather, I felt I had ejected myself up, right? It moved by will, in other words, and went soaring beyond the Guardian, beyond the yellowish plateau, into another world of people. And I found myself standing in the middle of Don Juan's room. Right? That's where we left off. Yes?
Okay.
Right, Beena?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So hello to all the TikTokers joining us. Brilliant. We love you. And comment, say hi, share. And again, share your understanding rather than agree or disagree, like, dislike, understanding, more important than all of those, right? This
Yes.
is very, very important to share understanding. It's what Moreness-Culture is all about. Just checking on IG. Let's
Yes.
see. All right, there we go. There we go. Oh, somebody sent me a message there. Okay, so I definitely have to come back to you later on. I love you, Stephanie, but right now I'm doing the live, so let's get back here. I want Stephanie to come join us, and read and practice like you are, right? Practice her
Yes.
reading skills.
Oh, yes.
This is, why you say, well, why is Beena doing the bulk of the reading? Because Beena's practicing the reading skills, and she's, it's a dramatic improvement since Beena started, and
Oh,
it's
yes.
very courageous. It's very
Yes.
courageous because you're not reading where you prepared. It's new. Beena's never read this before, and now you're reading off the cuff, which means you have to adapt on the cuff, right? And it's a very
Yes.
different thing, and you need to learn to read with your eyes ahead of what you say, which is a very particular skill, right? Because sometimes you need to see what's coming in order to get the rhythm right, the emphasis right, the cadence right, and all of this, and the meaning of it, right? So it's a big concentration building effort skill, right? It takes a lot to do this. Very powerful.
Oh,
All right,
yes.
and
It
then
is.
also, we are changing things, like where they say man, where they mean people. We read people, right? Because we don't want to perpetuate that inadvertent misogyny. Maintain this habit thing. No, we want to break this. Right? Instead of saying men when you mean people, we say people, right? And also when it comes to the term seeing, which is what this book, no, we're changing it to perceiving, because Don Juan later says it's not a good term, right? It biases you towards thinking it's something with your eyes. Since we say perceiving, if you're coming at this new and for ourselves, we want this activity, this thing that we're talking about, to be connected and associated with perceiving, because that's what it really is. It's not seeing, it's perceiving, right? So little things that we do bring it extra to it. Very big deal. Very big deal. All right, Beena, please read.
Yes. Yes. Okay. You just scrolled it again?
It's right.
Okay.
It should
Yes.
be January
Yes. January
19. Yeah.
19. Yes. January 19, 1969. I really thought I had overpowered the guardian.
You must be kidding.
Don Juan had not spoken one word to me since the day before, and I did not mind it. I had been immersed in a sort of reverie, and again, I had felt that I looked intently. If I looked intently, I would be able to perceive, but I did not perceive anything that was different. Not talking, however, had relaxed me tremendously. Don
Which
Juan
is a bit of
asked
a
me,
turn up for the books. Normally Carlos is relaxed by talking, not by not talking.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Don Juan asked me to recount the sequence of my experience and
Which
what
is again a turn
particularly,
up for the books, right? Normally Don
yes,
Juan is like, not particularly
yes,
interested in Carlos's things, but now he wants to know specific.
yes. And what particularly interested him was the hue I had seen on the guardian's back. Don Juan sighed and seemed to be really concerned. You were lucky that the color was on the guardian's back, he said with a serious face. Had it been
Oh,
on the
I was
front part?
supposed to be me. Oh, that was supposed to be me. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
You
yes.
were lucky that, because I'm reading Don Juan. Another time, being I was thinking of this yesterday. We need to switch a bit, and I read Carlos, you read Don Juan. But anyway, but
Yes.
just because the reason we do it this way is because there's more to read as Carlos, and gives Bina more practice. Right? So you were lucky that the color was on the Guardian's back. Well,
He
I'll leave you
said with
to
a
say the you
serious,
said with it. Yeah, because that
uh,
matters, right? Because it's serious, right?
yes,
Had it
yes,
had it been
yes.
on the front part of its body, or worse yet, on its head, you would be dead by now. You must not try to perceive the Guardian ever again. It is not your temperament to cross that plane. Yet I was convinced that you could go through it. But let's not talk about it anymore. This is only one of a variety of roads. All right, so I have to comment here. Yes, I spoke about the language of the universe, or the language of the world, but it's really the language of the universe, the abstract language, the language of metaphor, of symbology, the matter of figurative language, right? Which is that
Yes.
color was Carlos's unfavorable color, and well, duh, if you're getting shown your unfavorable color, this means don't proceed, right? But now we bring in very specifics. Symbolically, I cannot find a logic to why the head would be the worst. Maybe if I think about it, I could, but it's not immediately obvious to me, right? You know, okay, maybe symbolically it's on the back, which is saying it's not that. On the front, it's maybe more prominent, and on the head, it's like, well, really, it's like this is the most important part. I don't know. You know, maybe in that way you can, but it seems very nuanced to me that.
Yeah, I personally feel that because it's on the back, so I'm not going to harm you, but I'm just giving you a warning. But if it is on head,
Right.
then it is like I'm coming towards you. So now we are in
Yeah,
a fight.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just saying, you know, we need to make this effort to learn this language, because Don Juan obviously knows this language, but it's not the language that we know. I mean, in anomalies, when you look at things symbolically, you can figure it out, which is what Beena and I just did, right? And the more you figure it out, the more these things you see the obviousness of it, right? You just have to make that effort, like we just did now, right? Like I said, for me, it wasn't immediately obvious, but when you start to figure it out, oh, okay, duh, right? So it's important, because the more you practice this, the more it's immediately duh, and that's what you want it to be, right? All right. Let's continue. This was only one of a variety of roads. And it's very important to understand too, that if one way isn't working, find another way, right? It doesn't mean that this is not for you. You just have to find a different one, right?
I detected an unaccustomed heaviness in Don Juan's tone. What will happen to me if I try to perceive the guardian again?
The guardian will take you away. It will pick you up in its mouth and carry you into that plane and leave you there forever. It is obvious that the guardian knew that it is not your temperament and warned you to stay away.
Ah, how do you think the guardian knew that? Don Juan gave me a long, steadfast look. He tried to say something, but gave up as though he was unable to find the right words.
I always fall for your question. You were not really thinking when you asked me that, were you?
I protested and reaffirmed that it puzzled me that the guardian knew my temperament. Don Juan had a strange glint in his eyes when he said,
And you had not even mentioned anything about your temperament to the guardian, had you?
Stone was so comically serious that we both laughed after a while. However, he said that the guardian, being the keeper, the watchman of that world, knew many secrets that a Brujo was entitled to share. That's okay. Yeah.
That's only one way a Brujo gets to perceive. But that will not be your domain, so there's no point in talking about it. All right, so I want to make this very, very clear here. Yes, this whole Brujo world and the world that the Guardian protects, this is the world of sorcery and all the things that go with it, right? In the greater scheme of things, it is about manipulation of power for personal gain. It is a world. It's not a world that we need to go in, right? And this is actually a very great boon to Carlos, that the Guardian had warned him away. First of all, if Carlos, he likes the things a little bit, but he's not really obsessed with that like the old people in the old days were, you know, about killing your enemies and that. It's not really a thing. So he would have been a dabbler at best. And in that world, you can't dabble. You got to go all in or nothing, because this is a competitive world and the stakes are very high, right? So you got to be really serious going in there. But in the bigger scheme of things, there's no point to that. It's all superiority paradigm. It's a whole world that came out as a result of superiority paradigm. So it's a nonsense world, really. Right? There's no benefit to it, no value to it. It's just you're looking to gain power over what? Don't have enemies in the first dang place. You know what I mean? It's like Beena and I, when this thing of enemies came up, we laughed. It's like, it's so ridiculous. It's so absurd. It's so preposterous.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, enemies is just not part of our reality, you know. I'm not actually using this mic, but it just looks weird that I don't have it on. Anyway, so this whole sorcery world is a part of Don Juan's lineage that he learned, but he is also not into it, right? He says early on when it comes, it's like pointless. There's no real value to it, right? So we have to understand this, right? But Don Juan is honor bound, his integrity, because the universe through attunement said, take Carlos as your apprentice, which means share your knowledge with him, right? So he's honor bound to share all of this because that's part of his knowledge. But also, okay, it's not for you, all right? I get the attunement, I get the anomaly, the omen, and nope, that's it. Right? He goes by appropriateness, in other words, right? So this is a great relief in a way, even though he doesn't say it. Right? But that's only one way. That's one way a brujo gets to perceive. But that will not be your domain, so there's no point in talking about it, right? So let it go, move on, right? Now let's continue.
But this is very very interesting that Don Juan know by attunement that Carlos is the person he's supposed to be here. Okay, yes, like duh, and he's
Correct.
doing that.
Correct.
And but also that he is having some ideas that it is going to be like a normal apprentice, and he will understand everything. He came by attunement, not by your choice.
Yeah.
So how
right? All the apprentices have to come about by attunement. You know.
Yes, but sometimes, like, okay, yes, sometimes maybe a brujo or a person of knowledge will choose someone like, okay, oh yes, I like this person, and then of course, like, they choose them because of their already existing skills and their way of doing things and all sorts of things. So then the expectations, okay, yes, I saw you that you have this thing, you can understand and all sort of things. You okay?
Yeah. I was just trying not to yawn too loud because my hand is cold and I have the hand wrapped up in a warm blanket. I didn't want to take it out to put it out of my mouth. So I was trying not to open my mouth wide and yawn. Innate politeness. Innate politeness.
Okay. But Don Juan's expectations and disappointments really a bit not so cool for me. That, okay, why to have this thing? Because Carlos is coming from a completely alien world for you, and for him
I know. Keep in mind, Beena, that
yes,
much of what Don Juan says is for Carlos's benefit. So don't
yes,
take it as being necessarily Don Juan's personal opinion, right?
Yes.
He's working Carlos because he has his agenda from the universe, which overrides everything else.
Okay.
It overrides everything else. So everything we look at it, we can't say this is what Don Juan feels. When it comes to personal feelings, Don Juan doesn't really have any, right? That's very important. I mean, yes, he does, but he doesn't let that affect him. And he's not going to express his personal opinion in a way which can affect Carlos. Absolutely out of the question. So when he does express personal opinion, he's doing it for the effect on Carlos to fulfill his mandate. This is very important to understand. So because otherwise we get into sort of, judging Don Juan a bit, and which is appropriate. We in Moreness-Culture, judging is a good thing, not a bad thing, because it's through judging that we have morality and sensibility and we understand things, right? This whole modern thing of that's anti-judging, it's just that people want to guard their indulgence. No, we're going to do that. Right? So in this case, when you look at it through those eyes, we see it a difference. Yes, Don Juan struggles with Carlos because Don Juan does not have language of conceptionality, which is the bridge between his world and Carlos's world. Right? Now, Don Juan is familiar with Carlos's world to some extent, but we see how, again, it's all necessary from attunement's point of view. If Don Juan had language of conceptionality, we wouldn't have all these 14 books. We might not even have one. You see, so it's all necessary in the bigger picture, right? And it helps us to realize the necessity and value of language of conceptionality, which is so key and core to Moreness-Culture, which is what we're doing and what we share, right?
Yes.
Make sense, Beena?
Yes, yes. Okay. Is the smoking the only way to perceive the guardian?
No. You could also perceive it without it. There are scores of people who could do that. I prefer the smoke because it is more effective and less dangerous to myself. If you try to perceive the guardian without the aid of the smoke, chances are that you may delay in getting out of its way. In your case, for instance, it is obvious that the guardian was warning you when it turned its back to you. So you would look at your enemy color. Then it went away. In other words, it gave you time and opportunity to get out of the way. But when it came back, you were still there. So it charged at you because you were dense and stupid and you didn't take the warning, right? You were prepared, however, and jumped. The little smoke gave you the protection you needed. Had you gone into that word without its aid, you wouldn't have been able to extricate yourself from the guardian's grip.
Why not?
Your movements would have been too slow. To survive in that world, you need to be as fast as lightning. In other words, you need to operate on a direct will level, not in the usual physical level. It's a different reality, right? Where you have to have that instant speed. Things are happening at a different pace because the guardian, even in the charge, it was slow. If the guardian really wanted to, it could have instantly just knocked Carlos and out, right? Because things are operating according to will over there, right? So that the speed is very important. To survive in that world, you need to be as fast as lightning. It was my mistake to leave the room, but I didn't want you to talk anymore. You're a blabbermouth, so you talk even against your desire. Had I been there with you, I would have pulled your head up. You jumped up by yourself, which was even better, however. I would rather not run a risk like that. The guardian is not something you can fool around. So we get an insight into this. But the bigger point here is, as interesting as the guardian is, it's not for us. Right? This is very clear. And also, like I said, anybody who thinks, oh, this is cool, you got all this power and all that, it's a dead end. It's why power is one of the enemies of awareness. Because it sucks you in and you think you're getting value. But this is hierarchy value. You're fighting everybody else. And ultimately, yes, you may be the most powerful, but you're always defending and guarding. What a life to live. No, man, it's horrible. Right? There's no point to it. Right? You're not getting any spiritual moreness out of it. You're only just getting relative power, which, to what end? Does it really benefit you in the long term, in terms of your spirit, in terms of absolute freedom? No, it doesn't. Right?
Yeah. But this is the power, the superiority paradigm is so entrenched, as you always say, that
Exactly.
from the childhood, we learn this thing that, of course, that, okay, whoever has power over us, like first our parents who become our hero because they have power. They have power to protect us, they have power to harm us, they have power to all sort of things, provide things and all that. And then, of course, some the cliche stories like, okay, having superheroes. This puts human in general in a bit of inferiority complex because, if like, okay, with all my abilities, I'm not a super person, but a superhero who is able to throw spider web from his hand. That's the only superpower. That's makes it makes him superhero, not the awareness, not the other thing. So we put ourselves in inferiority complex in general as a society. We do that.
Right. So superheroes also completely corrupt the understanding of hero. Superheroes are superheroes because they have a superpower. But just because you have a superpower, that actually makes you a little bit less heroic usually. All right, so there's the burning building. Superman comes and he flies and he saves the people from the building. What's heroic about that? It's very easy for Superman. He's got superpowers. Where's the risk to Superman? Zero. Yet he's the hero. He saved all the people. What was heroic about it? Nothing. All right, let's change this up, and we go a little bit into the future, and we've got a drone, right? You like that can fly, right? It's got jets in it and everything, right? And it's a robot though. It's just metal, right? And it goes and flies and saves the people. Was the drone heroic? Absolutely not.
Yes.
I think it's the job of the drone. It's there. It goes. That's it. There's no risk to the drone really. And even if the drone was at risk, so what? It's not heroic, right? So when we understand this, superheroes for the most part aren't actually heroic because they're not putting themselves out there. They're not really putting themselves at risk, which is really what the essence of a hero is. That you're doing something above and beyond that you weren't asked to do. And you're making a great effort. And sometimes that effort is also at great risk to you, right? But it's the extra effort and the risk, the combination, that makes things heroic. Yeah. So superheroes, for the most part, are actually not heroic. They've got their powers to bail them out, right? Isn't that interesting, Beena?
It is. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And this is why people want to be a superhero, because it makes being a hero easy. It doesn't really, right? You don't have the right quality, which is why there are some heroes which are truly heroes, like Captain America. He had no superpower. He has his shield, yes, but he really doesn't have personal superpowers. So very interesting. So some of them are a little different to the others. Always have superpowers. Batman used technology, but he doesn't actually have any superpowers in the normal sense, right? Just has good technology, which, okay. But Batman puts himself out there every time he goes out. Yes, he uses the technology and stuff to help him, gadgets and whatever. But still, when he's fighting with somebody, he has to rely on his own personal skills, for instance, right? So Batman he's in a different category. Yes.
Yes.
Interesting, Beena? Yeah.
It is, and it was our favorite hero since childhood.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, at that point it was. At that point, it was just because of his looks, because he looks more smart than Superman in the blue and red color.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So in the backstory of Superman, of Batman, him being called Batman is actually very important. Now, yes, it was in the space of the cave with the bats and all that, but really the key point in it was the bats were fundamental and instrumental in him overcoming fear. He was super afraid of the bats. Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, right? And the only way he could move forward was to overcome his fear of the bats. And once he did that and made the bats his friends, right? He turned an awful truth into an awesome truth by facing and dealing with the awful truth. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why he's called Batman. Okay.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool, Beena?
Yes.
Yeah. I love this. When we find out things are like, oh, there's a bit more, there's a bit of deepness to it, right? Very cool. Very cool.
Wow, this is really
so
good.
Batman relies on yes, the technology can only take you so far, but really what Batman relies on is strategy, right?
Yes.
When you get really down to it, it's strategy, and he's taking risk, yes, but strategically so, and that's the magic of Batman, right? And why I also like Batman as a superhero. And like I said, Superman to me, yeah, he's got cool powers and that, but okay, so what? You can do all the stuff, but that doesn't necessarily make you heroic. I mean, he is a good guy. He has good spirit, and he does put himself out there. I mean, he is a hero in the end, in the long run, but not nearly on the scale of Batman, if you ask me. Like I said, for Superman to be a hero is pretty easy, or to do things heroic. Your
Yes.
risk is fairly low or
Yes.
non-existent. So a lot of times he's doing things which are seen as heroic, but actually aren't. But I mean, he was a good guy, though. Superman's character is good, right? So I won't hold that against him. All right, let's continue. Fun stuff. But, you know, Batman is very interesting. Now, when you see the Batman movies and you have the dark side, we have to understand that the original character of Batman got extended and stretched a little bit because they want to make new movies, right? And so they changed the core story somewhat, which, yeah, all right, you know, it's a pity a little bit, but I understand why they do it. You're saying, well, you know, I guess from my view, it's like, all right, you got different universes, and Batman could have gone on this path, he could have gone on this path, right? And that's so good to see. But the core story of Batman, when you look at it in again through a conceptual viewpoint, in the overall, it's very cool. It's very cool. Right? It's saying we can be more, in other words, but we have to overcome ourselves. Please continue.
Yes.
Or
For 3
comment.
months. Okay. For 3 months, Don Juan systematically avoided talking about the garden. I paid him 4 visits during 3 months. These months, he involved me in running errands for him every time, and when I had performed the errands, he simply told me to go home. On April 24, 1969, the 4th time I was at his house, I finally confronted him after after we had eaten dinner and were sitting next to his earthen stove. I told him that he was doing something incongruent, incongruous to me. I was ready to learn, and yet he did not even want me around. I had had to struggle very hard to overcome my aversion to using his hallucinogenic mushroom, and I felt, as he had said himself, that I had no time to lose.
And so here we come to a very important point, right? In our capital R reading, look at the Moreness.
Yes.
Yeah? In Moreness-Culture, and particularly in Nobelia-Culture, right? On with the new nobility, it's a long story, right? Nothing to do with hereditary nobility actually being noble. So Nobelia is the home of a society that revolves around actually, for real, being noble. Nobleness in its true meaning. Nothing to do with titles and all that nonsense. And in this, and part of Moreness-Culture, but particularly on Nobelia, the assumption of intent is absolutely critical. Yes. So once we know somebody has a Moreness intent, has integrity, has self-honesty, has Moreness, is impeccable, we can never, ever doubt their intent. Never. Right? We may question it, but, you know, we'll always assume the best intent and then go and check, like in this case. Carlos is assuming that there's some negative, incongruous, something that doesn't, but he doesn't assume that Don Juan has a very good reason for doing this. All right, so now he comes and say there's a problem, rather than coming to Don Juan and say, look, I know you've got some good reason for this, but for the life of me, I can't figure it out. Or furthermore, even going all the way and saying, I'll just trust. I know Don Juan said I got no time to lose, but yet this is obviously important. Let me just run with it and just be patient and it will come. See my point, Beena? The difference here in the assumption of the other's intent changes our behavior, changes our mindset, changes our attitude, changes our internal state of being. You can still come and ask Don Juan, hey, I don't know what's going on, but you'll be at peace with what Don Juan is doing because you're going to trust. Okay? Make sense, Beena?
Yes.
So the assumption of intent, especially if you're in a community or an interaction with somebody that is valuable and precious to you and more, we always have to insist on the assumption of good intent. This is not easy to do.
It is not easy.
Carlos is doing, it's very difficult because we've been trained in the reverse. Superiority trains us to be unnecessarily and excessively and unduly suspicious and untrusting.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. In my case, at least I can say about myself, I was not trained to be like this. Okay. And
Correct.
not
Me
for
neither.
me.
Me
Because
neither.
for
Me
me,
neither.
it was
Yeah.
like
Never.
simply but now in my case, there is something you can say the memory of my experiences in the past, one after another, and these memories is okay. Because I do share with everyone very openly. Uh, I am a bit
You do. You
suspicious
do.
about women now. Okay, and especially
Correct.
okay, not at
Correct.
the
Correct.
beginning, but when they do show some signs, I feel a bit like okay, oh, I need to protect myself because
Right.
otherwise
Right.
I have
Right.
seen experienced something horrible in the past. It
Right.
never
Right.
happened with
Right.
male side. My friends are so wonderful, but the
Yeah.
women,
Yeah.
they do
Yeah.
have a problem.
Right. Now, in your case, Beena, it's the reverse. You had an excess of inappropriate assumption
Yes,
of good intent. I did
yes,
qualify. I didn't say we have to have the assumption of good intent with everybody. I
yes.
said only once you know already that this is valid, then,
Hmm.
like in Don Juan's case, right?
Yeah.
Carlos has had ample opportunity to know that Don Juan is someone that has integrity and acts impeccably. Right? I mean, true integrity, capital I integrity, and capital I impeccability, right? And appropriateness. Yes, this is Don Juan's life. So he has that where he does trust Don Juan. He puts his life in Don Juan's hands many times, right? Taking the smoking mixture, you have to really trust somebody. You don't know what could happen. I mean, you could die from taking drugs, right? So he
Oh, yes.
really does trust Don Juan. However, that trust is not easily given. But once you know this, and then you have to, so it's conditional. But you had this where you were inappropriately trusting and giving assumption of intent, and that got into trouble, right? So you had to
Yes.
learn the reverse lesson. For you, it was
Yes.
the opposite. But now you must be careful of not generalizing again, right? So it's always
Yes.
about discernment, nuance, that we
Ah.
need to learn to live according to appropriateness. You cannot say because you had this experience that's going to always apply. That's inappropriate. No, because you cannot generalize, right? Even though it may be in general true, generalizations tend to make us see 100% rather than, well, in general, which is just like what, 60% more or less, a little bit more than 50%, 60, 70 makes it in general. You can't. This is very flawed because you're going to miss your opportunities, right? You're going to miss the moreness, and especially in your personal relationships, this can be a problem. So we have to be judicious and apply these things with capital D. So very cool, very cool. I love this. Very important lesson. Very important lesson, right?
Okay. Don Juan
Assumption of intent. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
Don Juan patiently listened to my complaints.
Now look at Carlos here. Inadvertently, he is being honest here, right? Because he
Yes.
says complaints.
Yes.
If you'd listened to your own words, Carlos, you would have realized that he's complaining appropriate. No, it's not. Right? Okay. You're too weak. You hurry when you should wait. But you wait when you should hurry. You think too much. Now you think there's no time to waste. A while back you thought you didn't want to smoke anymore. Life is too damn loose. You're not tight enough to meet the little smoke. I am responsible for you, and I don't want you to die like a goddamn fool.
I
On
felt
one scolding
embarrassed.
Carlos here. He's scolding,
Yes.
right? He's scolding him
Yes.
here, right?
Yes. I felt embarrassed.
Because let me just get a little bit inside the psychology here, right? Like I said, Don
Yes.
Juan is being strategic and appropriate. Why is he choosing now to scold Carlos? He's known this about Carlos for 9 years. They met in 1960. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
1969. He's known Carlos for 9 years. Now he says this to Carlos because Carlos was too fragile before. And for the first time, Carlos is coming to him with an earnest question he wants to know. So that earnest desire is now making Carlos able to withstand the truth because he wants to know something. You see?
Yes.
See how Don Juan is leveraging Carlos's desire. Yeah. But when you really want something, you're willing to pay a price for it when you really want something. And Carlos never had this before. He was a reluctant apprentice all this time. He didn't have any real desires. He has a desire to perceive, and also he has a more temporary desire to understand Don Juan's motivation. Right? So he's leveraging this. Right? The sophistication of Don Juan must never be forgotten. It's there always. Okay?
Yes. Yes. I felt
Very important.
embarrassed. I felt embarrassed. What can I do, Don Juan? I'm very impatient.
Live like a warrior. I told you already. A warrior takes responsibility, capital R, takes responsibility for their acts, for the most trivial of their acts. You act out your thoughts, and that's wrong. You failed with the guardian because of your thoughts.
How did I fail, Don Juan?
You think about everything. You thought about the guardian, and thus you couldn't overcome. First, you must live like a warrior. I think you understand that very well.
I wanted to interject something in my
Uh, uh,
I wanted to interject something in my defense, but he gestured with his hand to be quiet.
Your life is fairly tight. In fact, your life is tighter than Pablito's or Nestor's, Gennaro's apprentices. And yet they perceive and you don't. Your life is tighter than Eligio's, and he'll probably perceive before you do. This baffles me. Even Gennaro cannot get over that. You faithfully carried out everything I have told you to do, everything that my benefactor taught me. In the first stage of learning, I have passed on to you. The rule is right. The steps cannot be changed. You have done everything one has to do, and yet you don't perceive. But to those who perceive, like Gennaro, you appear as though you perceive. I rely on that, and I am fooled. You always turn around and behave like an idiot when you don't, like an idiot who doesn't perceive, which of course is right for you. All right. So again, right, this conundrum, this peculiarity, this bafflement that Don Juan and Gennaro have, right, with Carlos. Carlos is his life is tighter than the other apprentices, but Nestor and Pablito and Nestor, they perceive to some degree. Eligio, who's like he's sort of in the longer run, he's the more advanced of all of them, but he still doesn't perceive it, and his life is as tight as Carlos's, which is really fascinating, right? So Carlos does the things that Don Juan recommends, but yet still, this is why it is to bring us the story. The universe is setting it up so that this bafflement makes this whole thing a long, drawn-out story, that we get all the detail that we otherwise would never get. Huh? So when we look at this from an attunement point of view, we look at that overview perspective, which is so crucial in Moreness-Culture, in the language of conceptionality, overview perspective. Don't ever forget it. Always know where the surface is. Always be connected to the surface. Always be connected to overview. Now all of this makes sense. Capital M, capital S makes sense. Right, Beena?
Yes. Wow.
Right. All the bafflement makes sense. All right, please continue.
Don Juan's words distressed me profoundly. I don't know why, but I was close to tears. I began to talk about my childhood, and a wave of self-pity enveloped me. Don Juan stared at me for a brief moment and then moved his eyes away. It was a penetrating glance. I felt he had actually grabbed me with his eyes. I had the sensation of two fingers gently clasping me, and I acknowledged a weird agitation, an itching, a pressure, a pleasant despair in the area of my solar plexus. I became aware of my abdominal region. I sensed its heat. I could not speak coherently any more, and I mumbled, then stopped talking altogether.
Perhaps it's the promise.
Don Juan said after a long pause. I beg your pardon?
A promise you made, the promise you once made long ago. All right, let's just pause a second. We can, if we start to put things together, understand that Don Juan did something to Carlos. He reached out and touched him, but not physically. He touched him with his awareness, with his will. Yes, with his capital P perceiving. Because he's seeing there's a problem with Carlos here. There's a blockage here, right? And he reached out to know what it is. And now we are getting, Don Juan is looking to get Carlos to that point. You can't just tell him straight away, because this goes against the logic of attunement and awareness. You have to figure things out for yourself, right? So Don Juan can only start to give him little clues, kind of lead him there. He has to get there by himself, right? So perhaps it's the promise.
What promise?
You muted, Beena? Oh. Yeah. I beg your pardon, Carlos. It says you. Then it's Don Juan again, right? So
yes. I beg your pardon.
A promise you once made long ago.
What promise?
Maybe you can tell me that. You do remember it, don't you?
I don't.
You promised something very important once. I thought that perhaps your promise was keeping you from perceiving.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so here we see, if we now again capital R reading, right? You mentioned before that Carlos says Don Juan a lot, right? He says, I don't know what you're talking about. This is very informal. It taking that relationship away, yeah? Because and this reveals Carlos's stress in the moment, that he's forgetting his politeness, right? You see what I mean? If you understand that culture of politeness is almost being a bit rude in when he says, I don't know what you're talking about, right? You understand what I mean? But rude, Beena?
Yes. Oh, it is, yes.
But
sometimes we do get rude.
Right. Right, but it's indicative of Carlos's severity of the pressure that he's feeling here. He's under stress, right? So you forget about your politeness. It just comes out, right? So, but of course, Don Juan is not going to be paying attention. It's irrelevant, but it's handy for us as an indication of Carlos's emotional state, right? I'm talking about a promise you made, very emphatic. You must remember it.
If you know what the promise was, why don't you tell me, Don Juan?
See, now the Don Juan comes back in again, right? No, it won't do any good to tell you. Again, the reason for this is that awareness has to be attained by oneself, right? It's very important that he gets there by himself for the power of it. Because when it comes from somebody else, it's their thing, not yours, right? So when you come to it, it's yours, right? So it's part of the process, right?
Was it a promise?
Go ahead.
I made to myself? For a moment, I thought he might be referring to my resolution to quit the apprenticeship.
No, this is something that took place a long time ago.
I laughed because I was certain Don Juan was playing some sort of game with me. I felt mischievous.
See the superiority paradigm coming into it here again? Sorry to interrupt there, but it's important, right? Again, we're talking about assumption of intent. Whenever Carlos is baffled and things like this, where Don Juan is by implication doing something that has moreness to it, because Carlos's brain hasn't yet accepted moreness. It must be some kind of manipulation or whatever. He puts it into superiority paradigm motivations, and he starts to kill the thing, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I laughed because I was certain Don Juan was playing some sort of game with me. I felt mischievous. I had a sensation of elation in the idea that I could fool Don Juan, who I was convinced knew as little as I did about the alleged promise. I was sure.
See, he was convinced. He's convinced that Don Juan is BSing him.
I was
You
sure
know
he
Don
was
Juan to
fishing in the
be
dark.
a person of integrity. Sorry, I just scolding Carlos here, right? This point about assumption of intent. You know Don Juan is a person of integrity. Is he going to just BS you for nonsense reasons? Hell no. But yet you believe this of him. It's contradictory, right? I mean, if you went on a universal lie detector that was truly accurate and asked him, is Don Juan an honest person that has integrity? Yes. Is Don Juan somebody who just casually tried to fool you for nonsense reasons and ego? No. But yet he believes it, yeah, see? Deep down, it goes against his real deep convictions. But on the surface, the habit of superiority paradigm thinking is putting him inside a bubble. See? We have to understand this. Carlos is in a little bubble, a superiority paradigm bubble here that goes against his real, deep, true understandings and knowings about Don Juan. Yeah? Fascinating, isn't it, Beena?
Yes. But
Yeah.
also I'm amazed at how charmed you are against Carlos. Like, oh, I just got a chance to scold him. Like, really? Seriously?
Well, because this is crappy to me. This is crappy, and it comes up regularly with Carlos, and I don't know. This to me, all right. I understand he's from the superiority paradigm, but
Yes.
I hope
Okay.
he'd be better than this. But
I was convinced. I knew as little as I did about the alleged promise. I was sure he was fishing in the dark and trying to improvise. The idea of humoring him delighted me. Was it
what really
something?
delights you is the idea in your mind, Carlos, that you could now somehow be a little bit more superior to Don Juan. That's
Yeah,
what's delightful.
seriously. Was it something I promised to my grandpa?
No.
He said, and his eyes glittered. Neither was it something. Okay, yeah.
Uh, uh, sorry. Neither was it something you promised your little grandma.
Ludicrous intonation he gave to the word grandma made me laugh. I thought Don Juan was
But
setting.
you see, right away, right? Immediately when Carlos says, was it something I promised to my grandpa? Don Juan knows exactly what Carlos is doing. Like, well, this is kind of obvious, right? But Carlos, in his bubble of thinking he's sophisticated, he's going to pull a wool over Don Juan's eyes. Now, he has no comprehension of the sophistication. And Don Juan immediately sees his game and flips it on him, right? And Don Juan gives him a gift when he says, neither was it something you promised your little grandma. Uh, like, okay, right? So now the game is up. But let's see if Carlos is sharp enough to realize that the jig is up, right?
I thought Don Juan was setting some sort of trap for me, but I was willing to play the game to the end. I began enumerating all the possible individuals to whom I could have promised something of great importance. He said no to each. Then he steered the conversation to my childhood. Why was
Why
your
was
child?
your childhood sad?
He asked with a serious expression. I told him that my childhood had not really been sad, but perhaps a bit difficult.
Everybody feels that way. I too was very unhappy and afraid when I was a child. To be an Indian is hard, very hard. But the memory of that time no longer has meaning for me. Beyond that, it was hard. I had ceased to think about the hardship of my life even before I had learned to perceive.
I don't think about my childhood either.
Why does it make you sad then? Why do you want to weep?
I don't know, perhaps when I think of myself as a child, I feel sorry for myself and for all my fellow men. I feel helpless and sad. He looked at me fixedly, and again my abdominal region registered the weird sensation of two gentle fingers clasping it. I moved my eyes away and then glanced back at him. He was looking into the distance, past me, His eyes were foggy, out of focus.
It was a promise. It was a promise of your childhood.
Said after a moment's silence. What did I promise? He did not answer. His eyes were closed. I smiled involuntarily. I knew he was feeling his way in the dark. However, I had lost some of my original impetus to humor him.
Right.
I
So,
was
some part of Carlos has realized, subconsciously he's not making that connection because his awareness isn't in the moment. Yeah? He's not aware of himself enough to have realized that, when Don Juan said with the little grandma, Carlos should have stopped playing his game then already and realized that, hey, there's something else going on here. But inside of him, some part does know this, right? And that's why he lost this impetus to kind of be mischievous, right? And to humor Don Juan, right? So he does know, but he doesn't know, right? All right, please continue then.
okay. I was a skinny child.
Oh, no, yeah. Sorry, it's what did I promise? Yeah.
What did I promise? He did not answer. His eyes were closed. I smiled involuntarily. I knew he was feeling his way in the dark. However, I had lost some of my original impetus to humor him.
I was a skinny child, and I was always afraid.
So was I.
Yeah, me too. By the way.
You were not. You were not.
Well, I was a skinny child.
You were? I saw a picture you were very chubby.
Yeah. Only the one. That's the only time. And I was 2 years old and I lost all that. So after that, I got sick and ill and I didn't eat for like 2 weeks. And then ever after that, I was very skinny. I'm still relatively skinny. Yeah.
Okay, it's your turn, sir. Okay.
Oh, I was a skinny child and I was, what I remember the most is the terror and sadness that fell upon me when the Mexican soldiers killed my mother.
No, sir, my father died of this wounds.
Yeah. Well, that's where I had to go. So, right. So you just read this part and then I'll continue. Yeah?
Oh, yes. Oh,
yeah. He said softly, that's you.
Oh, sorry.
All right, let me read it again. What I remember the most. Okay. What I remember the most is the terror and sadness that fell upon me when the Mexican soldiers killed my mother.
He said softly, as if the memory was still painful.
She was a poor and humble Indian. Perhaps it was better that her life was over then. I wanted to be killed with her because I was a child. But the soldiers picked me up and beat me. When I grabbed onto my mother's body, they hit my fingers with a horsewhip and broke them. I didn't feel any pain, but I couldn't grasp anymore, and then they dragged me away.
He stopped talking. His eyes were still closed, and I could detect a very slight tremor in his lips. A profound sadness began to overtake me. Images of my own childhood started to flood my mind. How old were you, Don Juan? I asked just to offset the sadness in me.
Maybe 7. That was the time of the Great Yaqui Wars. The Mexican soldiers came upon us unexpectedly while my mother was cooking some food. She was a helpless woman. They killed her for no reason at all. It doesn't make any difference that she died that way. Not really. And yet for me it does. I cannot tell myself why, though. It just does. I thought they had killed my father too, but they hadn't. He was wounded. Later on, they put us in a tram like cattle and closed the door. For days, they kept us there in the dark, like animals. They kept us alive with bits of food they threw into the wagon from time to time. My father died of his wounds in that wagon. He became delirious with pain and fever and went on telling me that I had to survive. He kept on telling me that. until the very last moment of his life. The universe getting involved. The people took care of me. Emphasis, right? Emphasis. Don Juan was very casual about throwing his life away. There's an emphasis to say, no, the life is precious. It's important, regardless of being nobody. Okay? See, when we look at things from universal perspective, we see the universe will go to great lengths to make a point that we really, really need to understand. I call them soul lessons. Okay? And your parents, especially, are willing to give their lives for this point to be made in you. Also very important to understand, right? They have that intent to do everything for their children. And this is the most important thing. Look, Don Juan was quite willing to die with his mother, right? But both his parents, no, got to die, right? The people took care of me. They gave me food. An old woman curer fixed the broken bones of my hand. And as you can see, I live. Life has been neither good nor bad for me. Life has been hard. Life is hard for a child. Life is hard, and for a child, it is sometimes horror itself. No.
He did not speak for a very long time. Perhaps an hour went by. Oh, okay. Went by in complete silence. I had very confusing feelings. I was somewhat dejected, and yet I could not tell why. I experienced a sense of remorse. A while before, I had been willing to humor Don Juan, but he had suddenly turned the tables with his direct account. It had been simple and concise and had produced a strange feeling in me. The idea of a child undergoing pain had always been a touchy subject for me. In an instant, my feelings of empathy for Don Juan gave way to a sensation of disgust with myself. I had actually taken notes, as if Don Juan's life were merely a clinical case. I was on the verge of ripping up my notes when Don Juan poked my calf with his toe to attract my attention. He said he was perceiving a light of violence around me and wondered whether I was going to start beating him. His laughter was a delightful break. He said that I was given to outbursts of violent behavior, but that I was not really mean and that most of the time the violence was against myself. You're right, Don Juan.
Of course.
He urged me to talk about my childhood.
Sorry, I'm always amused at Don Juan's humor. I share the same humor, so anyway.
Yes. He urged me to talk about my childhood. I began to tell him about my years of fear and
Can
loneliness.
I just pause a second here, Beena? He
Yes.
urged me to talk about my childhood. You may, on the surface, think Don Juan's whole sharing about his sad tale of his childhood was, just a moment. Don Juan was feeling it, and, as things come up, you share. It's all to set the stage. Don Juan is doing it because it's appropriate. He knows where he's going. His sharing is to create the mood, the atmosphere to connect Carlos now, in turn, knowing Carlos's reciprocity is going to get him to share, about his childhood. Because he asked him before and he didn't, so he's trying again. Don Juan is making an effort here. When we look at the bigger picture, we see it in a different light, right? We see Don Juan's sophistication, very profound sophistication.
Yes. He urged me to talk about my childhood. I began to tell him about my years of fear and loneliness and got involved in describing to him what I thought to be my overwhelming struggle to survive and maintain my spirit. He laughed at the metaphor of maintaining my spirit. I talked for a long time. He listened with a serious expression. Then, at a given moment, his eyes clasped me again, and I stopped talking. After a moment's pause, he said that nobody had ever humiliated me, and that was the reason I was not really mean.
You haven't been defeated yet. You haven't been defeated yet. You
He
have
said,
not been defeated yet. I'm saying it 4 or 5 times, like him, right?
yes. He said he repeated this statement 4 or 5 times, so I felt obliged to ask him what he meant by that. He explained that to be defeated was a condition of life which was unavoidable. Men were either
People were.
victorious or yes, okay, people were either victorious or defeated, and depending on that, they became persecutors, or victims.
Yeah.
These two conditions were prevalent as long as one did not perceive. Perceiving dispelled the illusion of victory or defeat or suffering. He added that I should learn to perceive while I was victorious to avoid ever having the memory of being humiliated. I protested that I was not and had never been victorious at anything, and that my life was, if anything, a defeat. He laughed and threw his head on the floor.
If your life is such a defeat, step on my head.
He dared me in a jest. Okay.
Let me scroll up. Let me scroll up here. Let me scroll up.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I sincerely argued my point. Don Juan became serious. His eyes squinted to a fine slit. He said that I thought my life was a defeat for reasons other than defeat itself. Then, in a very quick and thoroughly unexpected manner, he took my hand in his hands and placing his palms against my temples, his eyes became fierce. As he looked into mine, out of fright, I took an involuntary deep breath through my mouth. He let my head go and reclined against the wall, still gazing at me. He had performed his movements with such a speed that by the time he had relaxed and reclined comfortably against the wall, I was still in the middle of my deep breath. I felt dizzy, ill at ease.
I perceive a little boy crying.
Don Juan said after a pause. He repeated it various times as if I did not understand. I had the feeling he was talking about me as a little boy crying, so I did not really pay attention to it.
Hey!
He said, demanding my full concentration.
I perceive a little boy crying.
I asked him if that boy was me. He said no. Then I asked him if it was a vision of my life or just a memory of his own life. He did not answer.
I perceive a little boy, and he is crying and crying.
Is he a boy I know?
Yes.
Is he my little boy?
No.
Is he crying now?
He's crying now.
He said with conviction. I thought Don Juan was having a vision of someone I know who was a little boy and who was at that very 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 moment crying. I voiced the name of all the children I knew, but he said those children were irrelevant to my promise, and the child who was crying was very important to it.
So Carlos is making the mistake of assuming irregular linearity. He's not thinking in the abstract, right? So when Don Juan said the boy is crying, it's a boy from your past and he's crying now. Don Juan, Carlos is not able to think in that abstract, conceptual, symbolic way, right? In this stuff, time is irrelevant, right? It's now and then, it happens at the same time, okay? Important to be aware of, yes?
Yes. Don Juan's statement seemed to be incongruous. He had said that I had promised something to someone during my childhood, and that the child who was crying at that very moment was important to my promise. I told him he was not making sense. he calmly repeated that he perceived a little boy crying at that moment, and that the little boy was hurt.
All right. So let's end it here for today, because there's actually still quite a bit of the story, and it's very profound, right? So we're getting enough now. We've got a nice mystery, and it'll carry over until tomorrow, and or Sunday, and we skip on Saturday. And this is very important, right? Because Don Juan is using his ability to perceive to get to a very crucial incident, a memorable event, a significant experience, an incident in Carlos's life that's affecting him. And this is very important. But it's how Don Juan is leading in there, right? And the thing is going to make sense to Carlos in a moment, right? And then there's a whole long story there. This is a very important point for Carlos. And I feel that we have these in our lives, these things that affect us, right? And it's very important to try and get in touch with them, especially when it comes to promises, resolutions, resolves, because those, when a child, they have a disproportionate power. They become an intent, and they can affect the rest of our lives, right? Very, very important, like in this case. So it's very important to understand this. Very, very, very important to understand this. Brilliant. All right. We'll end it there for today.
Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Whoever joined us or just visited us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and will watch us recorded on YouTube and Substack, and of course in the group Sassy. By doing so, actually, just please pay attention to what you are watching. I always say that, always emphasize just for myself also, because it's just a reminder for me to be very, very scrupulous about what we are getting. It is exactly like a nourishment for our soul and mind. If you're really struggling with your peace of mind, peace of being, do pay attention to your life and, of course, online algorithm. Be very careful about that.
Crucial.
Invest in yourself. Investment is not in terms of currency also. It is in terms of attention and focus.
Correct.
Where you are focusing, of course, it is going to create, of course, it can create peace, and it can create a chaos in your life.
Emphasis.
Randomness, laziness, and also it can be very, very thorough. So what we really want, be mindful about that. Make deliberate choices. This is the key to successful life. Successful in terms of having peace of being. This is what I call a successful life, when you have a peace of being, freedom of being, when you can acquire value even when it is not existing. This is the real success. You can do anything in the world if you have this ability.
Oh, yeah.
Please do pay attention to, because this is the real thing. And we will see you guys on Sunday. Bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.